Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Real Wealth Solutions podcast. If you are paying attention, I am wearing the same shirt because we're doing multiple recordings today. This afternoon, I'm flying solo with my friend Neil. We traded some emails earlier, I don't know, a few weeks ago or something, and we were just toying around with the idea of putting real estate into languages that we can understand a little bit better, just to help us think things through. So we were shooting around. Welcome, Neil, by the way. How are you today?
I'm well, Greg. How are you? It's
And
great to be back.
Neil is leading the count now on appearances on the Real Wealth Solutions. He has 100% more appearances than anybody else. And why don't we like percentages? Because when you say that in real numbers, it's one more appearance than everybody else. So yeah, good to see you. And I'm originally from Alaska. I spent 40 years there. I spent a fair amount of time doing some fishing. Neil and his family and his son are avid fisher people as well, fishermen, fisher persons. Not sure what the PC term is anymore. So yeah, we just thought it would be valuable to think of some things in a different context to maybe make them seem a little less, what's the right word? Intimidating.
Intimidating and complicated.
Yeah.
We're just gonna kind of talk a little bit and relate it to things that, if you're a fisherman, it kind of speaks your language. So we're gonna translate real estate into kind of fishing terms.
Yeah, and hopefully, like if you've got something that you have in your life that you can put it into context, and in the same way, maybe that'll make you seem or feel a little more comfortable with some of these concepts that you go through for real estate. Because we'll avoid fishing now for a second. Like I was listening to another guy. His name's Brian Chavez. He's an asset manager guy. He's got I'm part of his platform now, and he was putting asset management into the context of NASCAR. And I thought that was a great analogy, in that, the property manager is the actual driver and is behind the wheel and is watching gauges and is reacting to things immediately in front of them. But the asset manager, for this analogy, is basically the spotter who is up in the stands, who is watching the same race from a different angle, can see much further ahead than the driver can, and can relay down information to them for things that they are going to have to react to. In that case, seconds from now, but for asset management, that may be things, quarterly or whatever. Whereas the driver, being the property manager, has to be much more reactive. The asset manager, being in the spotter role, can forecast, even though it might be only a turn or two. That's hugely important in that context, because that's coming up at 160 miles an hour. So, the asset manager can forecast out a quarter or two.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the visionary, right? Like the asset manager kind of sees where we're going, and he can see how we're going to get there. Where the property manager is just looking at stuff that's directly in front of his face, and he's dealing with the stuff that's coming at him. He's putting out the fires every day. The asset manager just navigates.
Yeah, you can only, stuff's coming at you as fast as it can. You only have a very limited time to make decisions. And that may be all you have time to do, is to make quick decisions, because another phone call of the hot water heater exploding, or some issue with another property is coming down that phone line probably pretty soon. So, and so bring it back to the fishing thing, we started to talk about, market selection is such a big thing for real estate investing, choosing a market. And it's very similar, in fishing, when you're choosing a stream, you can do a certain amount of knowledge ahead of the time. There's just like real estate, there's forums, there's online resources, there's your own observations about driving the area that you want to fish. You can go walk it ahead of time before you even put a pole in the water. Um, and it's very similar to real estate. You can do all of those things ahead of the time. Um, and like a stream, this is like literally when I'm going to a fishing stream,
Yeah.
you walk up out of the parking lot, there's this big wide beat down trail to the closest bank where everybody fishes. And guess what? That's the MLS or something. I mean, that's where everybody's going and throwing their line in the water. And there's going to be a limited amount of success with that kind of approach.
There's absolutely going to be a limited amount of success, right? That's LoopNet, that's the MLS, that's all the websites that you can go to. You're not really building relationships there. You're just looking at what everybody else is looking at. But if you were to kind of go down the stream bank a little bit, maybe you would see that fallen log or that tree. And in the fishing world, that's where the bass are going to hang out. Or maybe you see that smooth pool out in the middle of the river where that's where the trout are hanging out. And you wouldn't have seen that unless you ventured a little bit further down the road. And to bring that back to real estate, that's making those calls to the brokers, that's building those relationships, that's doing a deeper dive into the neighborhoods that you may want to invest in, as opposed to just saying, I've heard good things about one of the big markets, Nashville or Atlanta or something. Yeah, well, that's a popular market, but what do you know about that market? Did you travel the stream to find out the pockets that you should be in?
Yeah, absolutely. And that just that will become apparent very quickly, I think, if you stay in on that bank with all those other people. You will probably realize your success rate is going to be pretty low. So, taking that fishing analogy is like, all right, screw this. I'm going to walk upstream now and see what's up there and get away from all of this traffic. Um, and that's kind of what you have to do in real estate as well. Yeah, you could spend some time down there and you'll probably catch a fish every now and then. But
You're not gonna catch a lunker down there. I'll tell you that, because it's fished so much that it's just kind of your common everyday fish. That's actually where I bring, like if I had a young kid that was just starting out, I would bring him to the common place, let him catch that small fish, and he's all excited about it because he caught a fish. But it's not the true fishing experience. It's not going into the woods, reading the river, and saying, I believe this is a good spot. Let me investigate it more.
right. Yeah, you're kind of alluding to the difference between maybe trophy fishing versus just going out and catching fish. And there's a great value to catching that first fish because you learn how to use the equipment properly. You learn how to let line run out if you need to, or whatever. But if your goal is to catch a record size rainbow trout, there are very specific things that you need to do in order to do that. The largest fish are not going to be where the most people are. That's how they get so large and are such a prize catch, is because somehow they are more difficult to catch. So, that goes back to the market research. So fishing can be as simple as going to local Jellystone campground and throwing a piece of bread on a bobber and catching a sunfish. Yeah, you can do that. It could be fun. But to really, set a goal for something specific, like, hey, back home it was to catch a 30-inch rainbow. That was
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
a line. It was like, man, I want to catch a 30-inch rainbow. So to do that, it takes a whole lot more time. It takes a little bit different preparation, um, and it takes a lot more intention. Very rarely do you accidentally
Yes.
catch a trophy fish.
I don't think you ever accidentally catch a trophy fish. Um, we went out once and it was a whole big process. We double anchored the boat. We were doing lake fishing for striped bass, and we double anchored the boat. Um, After that, we set lights over. We attracted the plankton. The plankton then attracted the herring. We then casted nets and collected those bait fish. Now we have a lot of bait fish that are swimming around under the boat. And then we set out the lines to go after the bass. And it was a 4-hour project of reading the water and doing all the proper steps in the proper order at the proper time before we caught that lunker. But we ended up catching the second largest bass on the lake for that year. And it was a really good experience, but we had to go through all of those steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you,
That was like building a network and talking to brokers and building
yes,
a team and doing things in the right order. That's exactly what you have to do. Not even real estate, any kind of business success. Uh, you can't just go out there and slap water. That's what we call it back home.
yeah,
Yeah, slapping
yeah.
water.
I mean, you could do that, but you're not gonna catch anything, right? So slapping water would be like, oh, I'm just gonna look at the MLS, or I'm just gonna look at LoopNet. I'm gonna call a broker once
I'm gonna call a broker
in a blue
once.
moon.
Yeah, just end it
Um,
right there. I'm gonna call a broker once.
I'm not gonna have my stuff together, right? I'm not gonna be able to speak the lingo. That's
Hmm.
just slapping water. You're just kind of out there. You're out there saying you're doing it, but you're not. It's more motion than actual action.
Hmm. Here's a note from our email the other day. So choosing a lure is like marketing to your ideal tenant. Um, Back home, the rainbow trout run with the salmon and are still actively feeding. To catch them, you have to fish deeper and use egg or flesh patterns. Fishing for salmon is a different column in the water. So, think about that in terms of marketing to a tenant. The river can be full of salmon, but my ideal tenant is the rainbow trout. So I have to market differently in terms of gear selection in order to reel in a rainbow trout. I have to get past all these salmon, and usually fishing for them, you actually fish for salmon on like an irritation reaction that they're not
It's all
actively
reaction.
feeding. Yeah, yeah. What is it called?
It's all reaction. They
Yeah, it's all right.
just
They're not in there to eat. You're like pissing them off, and they're like trying to get something away from them by biting it,
yes.
and that's how you
Mm-hmm.
catch a salmon. They're not. They're like, ooh, that's a lovely worm. I'm going to eat that. That's more of a rainbow trout reaction. So you have to be very specific, and that's like marketing to a tenant. I have to drop an egg pattern down through the water column, bounce it along the bottom, and have it act like a salmon egg. That's my ideal fish tenant. Okay. You can waste a whole lot of time trying to catch the rainbow trout using the wrong gear. The same is with tenants. You can waste a whole lot of time by attracting the wrong tenant and then getting them in and then having to deal with potentially getting them out. And that's a common thing fishing too. If you're out there with 2-pound test, light tackle, trying to catch 18 to 24-inch rainbow trout, and you get a 12.5-pound silver salmon on there, you know you're probably losing some gear at that point that you're just going to have to write off because you got the wrong thing on the wrong type of equipment.
And you have to identify. Going back to what you said, you're choosing your lure based upon what fish you're looking to attract, right? So you have to choose your marketing campaign, and your marketing campaign isn't just flyers that you post around or an ad you post up. Your marketing campaign is what the exterior of your property looks like. Your marketing campaign is what paint scheme you're going with inside your apartment, what amenities you're offering your clients. So to attract a certain clientele, you have to have certain amenities, and those amenities is part of your marketing program.
Yeah, right.
Like if
And additionally, part of your marketing may be uh, your move-in qualifications. That's another way that you can kind of get the wrong fish into the
your tenant screening, absolutely.
yeah, your tenant screening. If and I've heard more people talking about that lately through the pandemic and stuff as ways to hedge against potential more unemployment. We still don't know what's coming or what's happening. That actually upping your move-in criteria to be a little more stringent, maybe a higher credit score. Maybe you want to see 4 times income instead of 3, or maybe you want to see, 2 years of continued employment
And
instead of 6 months, because those combined, maybe that person will be a little more insulated from changes in the employment market because they're basically a little more established with their employer.
yes, and I mean, taking that one step further is what is the diversity of your tenant base? Nobody really, I've never heard many people talk about the diversity of your tenant base. So if you had, going through this pandemic, if you had primarily restaurant workers as your tenant base, you were going to take a much bigger hit than if you had accountants or engineers or even the retail space, right? If I filled my tenants with Amazon workers, they weathered the storm much better than the waitress or the line cook, uh, just because of how the market reacted to the virus.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's 7 protected classes of tenants. If you're not discriminating against those, you're fine. That doesn't mean that you can't be aware of the blend of your
Yes.
employment within your tenant base. That's a great point. You don't want to be, it's similar to putting all your eggs in one basket for stocks or even real estate, or completely buying in the same market. There
Yeah.
can be cautions that you want to take
So,
against relying too
mhm.
much on any single uh, metric, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not using the right marketing uh, process or marketing system, you're gonna come up with that salmon when you're looking to come up with that rainbow trout, and that's just gonna throw everything off. Whether it breaks the system, or now you have an extra uh, turn, or now you have to do an eviction. It could form itself. It could show itself later on down the road in many different forms.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the tackle box analogy a little bit. So this is how I think about the tackle box analogy. The great benefit to knowing your market, knowing your buying criteria, and well, really those 2 things are big. Is similar to uh, uh, a fishing approach, so that there were streams back home where all I cared was a little thing like this. I
Yep.
had a few flies. I knew I knew where I was going. I knew how long it would take to get there. I knew what my target fish was, and I didn't have to carry a giant. What's the brand? I can't remember what they are. The major tackle.
Rods.
No,
Plano.
Plano. I didn't have to have the giant Plano thing with every implement to fishing known to man.
Yeah.
I could walk in with my fly rod, the proper gear on to accomplish getting to, it's usually a bend, that I was going to. And once you have that comfort level, fishing becomes a whole lot more enjoyable than that phase where you're carrying around the giant Plano tackle box. And again, you might be like just slapping the water a little bit, trying to figure it out. So there's, in your approach to your market and knowing what you're doing, what you're after, and how to get there, you can save a lot of time.
Yes,
and enjoy it more though too.
I think it makes it a little bit more relaxing when you can
Yeah.
walk through the woods with a like a fishing vest on, and you have one or two small little pocket tackle boxes because you know exactly what you're going for. You know exactly how much weight you need, what size hook you need, if you're going to use a lure, what lure to use, as opposed to trying to cover every different scenario and go after every different fish that you might possibly come along. I think you tend, when I used to do that, when I was first starting out, I would do that, right? I'd go into the woods with a tackle box that I physically had to carry in my hand, and I could never decide which lure to use. Like I would use one lure, it wasn't working, and I would rush the process. And now I decide what I'm going after first, what my target fish is, and now I walk into the woods with that tiny little tackle box that I just stick in my pocket, and I spend an entire day in the woods, 12 hours, fishing a stream, and it's just off this one little tackle box because I'm much more educated and I'm much more specific in what I'm doing. I'm not looking to catch just anything. I want to catch the fish that's going to bring me the most joy in catching. And that's kind of like when I go out into my market, I'm looking to go after certain unit count properties, right? I'm looking to find a property that will allow me to refi and draw those funds out so that I can go out and do it again. It's just being real specific in what you're doing as opposed to just throwing a large net out there and hoping to catch something.
Yeah, but what if, Neil, that big salmon swims in front of you, that 280 unit A class, and you're out there comfortably equipped to catch brown trout? Do you throw a line in front of that 228 A class and see if you can land that thing, or do you risk losing all your gear?
That's everybody's.
That's a rhetorical question, by the way. But
Yeah,
I
no,
mean that
that's
happens all
everybody's
the
risk
time.
level.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, like in the fishing example, I'm throwing my line out there and seeing if I get lucky.
You can go
right?
buy more
Because
trilene when you
because
get.
that's risk and reward. I'm gonna lose a little bit. Like maybe I snap my rod. Well, if I have my really good rod, like if I have my St. Croix, maybe I'm not looking to snap that, so maybe I won't. But in the real estate world, I'm actually letting that go by because that's not my specialty. I may capture the information. You know what I would do in the real estate world, bringing that back? I would give that to somebody that I know that deals in that class. That's their sweet spot. So I would come back off the river. I would say, I would call my buddy up and say, hey, Greg, listen, I know you're in the market for salmon. I was out on the Delaware the other day, and he swam right past me. He's kind of playing in this 1/4 mile area. You may want to go out there and throw your rod and see if you can snatch it up. That's what I would do in the real estate world. I would pass it on to somebody that
Yeah, and we would see
knew
that.
what they were doing in that class.
Yeah, I mean, you see somebody catch and release fly fishing or something for trout, and they'd be like, they'd be somebody else, medium weight lure fishing, trying to catch salmon, and somebody be like, hey, why don't you come up here to this hole because there's a bunch of salmon in here that I don't want to mess with, but you're clearly going after them. Go ahead and,
Yeah.
have some fun up here. And just that reminded me, back to like the market research. Salmon fishing, surprisingly, at least in Alaska, in some rivers were similar in that there was actually published data of when the salmon came in. And this is like buying on the line or being in the path of progress, or buying in a gentrifying area. They would count these fish coming past a weir at the mouth
Yep.
of the Kenai or whatever,
Yep.
and they'd be like, hey, yeah, 80,000 sockeye salmon were counted at the weir on July 3rd. You can find that information and plan your fishing for the weekend with some basic knowledge of where those fish are going, how fast those fish are going to move upstream, and you can increase your accuracy and chances of catching those fish by not just going down to the Kenai River, but going down to the Kenai River with an estimate of where those fish
Yes.
are actually going to be traveling in the stream, and do much better than, again, just like going to where everybody goes,
So
going to where the parking lot is.
we would do that when I fish for salmon on the East Coast, and we go out to Pulaski, New York, on the Salmon River, and they wouldn't necessarily publish data, but you would talk to guys, and you would go to points that were closer to Lake Ontario, and you would kind of see where the fish were. You'd have to do your own recon, and you would see where the fish were, and you would say, all right, tomorrow they're going to be about here, and the next day they're going to be about here. So maybe I can get ahead of them. Maybe I can get into that path of progress and see what's going on. But yes, that's the path of progress, right? Like you're going out there, you're looking at, in the real estate world, you're looking at, well, how much construction is going on? What's the absorption rate? Things along those lines. How many properties have debt on them, and when is that debt coming due? Right. So you could do your market research that way. You could see how much debt's on a property and when that debt's coming due, because now that individual has to make a decision. Is he selling it? Is he refinancing? What's he going to do with that property? And that's that's the perfect time to hit him up, is when he's in that thought process of what his next move is going to be. And if you drop that lure in front of him at the right time, you may just catch yourself one.
Yeah, and then also the same kind of analogy can apply to different species of salmon and when they run, and then that could be more of an observation of the market cycle. So,
Yep.
the reds come in first. Darn it, I had to work. I didn't really have time to go down there and harvest any freezer fish or whatever. Now they're starting to age out. We're at the end of this cycle of red salmon, but the coho, or what is that, man, I've been out of Alaska a year. The silver salmon, they're going to be coming in 2 weeks. So it's like knowing the market cycle of real estate in your local market, supply, demand. What are the other two?
Recession and recovery.
Yeah. I think I actually got the first two wrong anyway. But you could recognize that, oh, okay, I'm on the tail end of one cycle. Do I want to use valuable resources now
Yes.
on the decline and maybe not have an adequate harvest to get me through the winter, or knowing that there will be another cycle of which I can get in front of and have a lot more time to benefit from that timing? Should I save those resources and be in front of the first fish and have 100,000 of them more to come than chasing the last 10,000 of the straggling fish that are left in the stream?
Yes, and that, I mean, that goes back to your comfort level, your experience level, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
and just how you feel about the market and where the market's going. If I'm going to try and get one of those stragglers, my criteria is going to tighten a lot. Whereas if I'm fishing out in front, I can add a little bit more risk to what I'm doing, because I have all of those fish still coming upstream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's basically timing the market. Nobody says it's impossible to time the market. There's
It's
but
impossible.
there are ways to probably benefit from
It's
known
impossible to time
market
them. Yeah,
trends that you have vetted out and are fairly confident will succeed at some level better than at least the status quo.
and that's what it is. You're never going to time the beginning or the end of one portion of that real estate cycle. But you can say, I've seen this go on in the past, and this usually leads to this. So I'm going to start watching out for the recovery here. I'm going to start watching out for construction to begin, infrastructure to begin. I'm going to start looking for those things because that's kind of how it moves. And it's not timing, it's taking appropriate risk at the appropriate time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And even in a small area geographically for fish runs, they will come up those streams at different times, even though they're centralized in a small geographic area. And
Right.
that's similar to like knowing your city. There will be, the micro market of a market that you can
Yes.
be like, yes, maybe overall this market that I'm interested in is flat or not doing well, but I do know that the soccer stadium is being built and they just got the permits for it or whatever, and it's going to come online in 3 years. I can, hit a base hit over there and kind of sit on it.
Well, you
And
could
in 3 years,
extrapolate, yeah.
yeah, you
You
can
could extrapolate that information out and say, in the past, when I've seen this, this has happened. And so I'm going to start watching out for that to happen. And when that starts happening, now maybe I make my move.
Yeah, because like these salmon runs, they happen in large numbers over or a large area, and you would listen to the fishing report, and they would be like, oh, on the Russian River at the weir, catches are dwindling down, but at the base or at the mouth of Deep Creek, they're limiting out. It's the same
Yeah.
salmon run. It's just where you're actually fishing.
It's where they are in the cycle,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's where they are in the cycle. Same general area,
So,
but
so
vastly different
yes.
catch rates going on.
So extrapolating that out into real estate, there's always a real estate market. Some markets are a buy market, some markets are a sell market, some markets are in recovery, some markets are in recession. You have to know where your market is and either move to another market or a sub market, or know your market and know, all right, well, I'm coming around turn number 4. We're going to start taking off soon, and construction's going to pick up, and absorption rates are going to pick up, and rents are going to start increasing. Migration, you're following migration patterns. All of that's going to give you information into where you are in the cycle or where those salmon are in the river.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it's Greg from Real Wealth Solutions. If you'd like to know more about our passive income opportunities, jump onto realwealth.solutions and hit that schedule a call button. We're always happy to talk about our multifamily and flip projects and to answer any questions you may have. Again, that's realwealth.solutions. We look forward to hearing from you. And now, back to the podcast. Mm-hmm. So let's take a sec. And I was thinking, taking it out of the context of fishing, we're in football country here in the SEC, which is something I'm not incredibly familiar with. Being from Alaska, we didn't have a whole lot of
Not too much football
sports. Yeah, we didn't do a whole lot of that.
up there, huh?
But I could easily see that if that is something that you're passionate about and have a lot of interest in, you could take some of the same things that we're talking about, putting it into the context of fishing, putting it into the context of having a successful football
Yes.
program. So, you're going to have to think about how to have successful practices in preparation, individually have successful games, how to have successful seasons, and then also like going back to that NASCAR analogy of having a spotter, having the foresight to also see beyond the season, knowing that some of these players aren't going to be here
Yes.
or whatever free agency contracts running around. Somebody announced their retirement, and that you will need to backfill talent at some point in order to try and continue to reach these very short-term goals as well as very long-term goals. So, so think about things that you might be able to, if this fishing stuff is just boring you completely, maybe you can spin it into something that you're more familiar with.
You use it as a framework so that you can take different pieces and insert it so that you can understand it. I think the football analogy is perfect, right? You have the guys that are on the front line. So those are kind of like going back to NASCAR, right? The quarterback may be the property manager because he's on the front line and he has to react to what's going on when it's actually physically happening. And then you have in NASCAR, it's the spotter, but in football, it would be the coach, right? And he could take a more macro look at what's going on, and the coach would be the asset manager, and he could see what the other team is doing, and he can now direct his team to change what they're doing in response to what the defense is doing.
Yeah,
You have, right?
or even offense and defense can
Yes.
be income and expenses to some extent, because defense in terms of controlling expenses is similar to controlling how many points are scored against you,
Yep.
which is a lot of what expenses are, is just controlling how much exposure you have to
And
loss. We actually call them losses.
practices are systems, right? Like
Yeah.
if you like,
Yeah.
you need. Nobody wins the Super Bowl by chance, right? It's a very intentional act to win the Super Bowl, and it's an intentional act because they set their goal and then they backtrack to what we're going to do in practices and what plays are we going to practice and how are we going to practice and where we're going to practice, and everything becomes a very intentional action so that we get to the point that we can win the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And those,
and there are still things that are completely out of your control, like a weird tip ball or something. But when things that are out of your control, you can still try and be in a position to take advantage of them. I agree with it. It's still very intentional, like that. There would never be that odd tipped ball if the quarterback didn't intentionally throw it at least towards a target, even if it
right?
was way off. It was still based on an intended outcome,
Yes.
but being
And how do you
aware
react?
enough,
Yeah.
how you react. Well, that's the other thing is, how do you react to things that don't go your way? I haven't watched football in a while, but it was the what was it? Was it last year? The New Orleans, they got something stolen from them in the playoffs by, was it by the Eagles?
I don't remember.
There was a bad ref call. And it doesn't even matter what the teams are. I'll just tell the story because I don't know what it is. There was a bad call by the refs. And one of the criticisms I heard about the team that was on the bad side of that call was how they groused about it on the sidelines. And the impression that this person had was that they got consumed by it instead of
Yep.
just saying, okay, this has happened. Let's refocus. And the criticism this person had was they basically let that get to them and let them lose focus. So it's how you choose to react to things that don't go, because things are not going to go your way
Not all the time.
Not all the time,
And,
maybe not even half of the time.
are you going to be able to deal with that and resolve it and come out winning on the other end? Another football story I recently read. There was a fumble. The player recovered the ball, and he actually ran into the wrong end zone. And I'm talking NFL here. This was going back years and years and years.
Yeah, I remember that.
He actually ran into the wrong end zone, and he went into the locker room, and he said to himself, well, I can let this consume me, or I can go out there and play the best football I ever did and redeem myself. And he actually used that as the catalyst to go out there and absolutely crush it. And in part from him going out there and playing his best game, they actually ended up winning the game. Mm-hmm. But it's again, it's all in how you. I don't even like react, because react is something you do kind of like automatically. I like using the word response, because react is subconscious, like you unconsciously just making some kind of movement or action. And when you respond to something, you're kind of doing it in a orderly, systematic, well thought out fashion. So how are you going to respond to it? Like you got to know the hits are going to come and keep moving forward.
Yeah. We'll wrap up here in a few because I know you got to go. So let's hit on one last thing from the email trade that we talked about, and I'll just read it. Fishing shows like Facebook videos are fun to watch. Rarely do they show anyone cleaning fish, washing the boat, storing the boat, fixing the boat, organizing the tackle box, or the fact that there may be multiple tackle boxes, prepping and preserving fish, paying for the ice, the gas, the boat insurance, the alarm going off at 4 a.m., the drive, untangling lines, tying knots in the dark, getting hooks out of thumbs, and all the hours spent not catching fish. So there is, yeah, there's a little bit of cynicism there, a little, but I think there tends to be a little bit of a survivorship bias or a selection bias in what we see online with people's successes and predictions and stuff like that. You always see somebody posting a video of when they made a comment and it happened to play out in real life. Rarely do you see the video of the person recapping all the things that did not come to fruition that they predicted. So this is tough. It's hard. It takes a lot of time. It doesn't go very well sometimes, and please be aware of that.
Yes. So that was all of the fishing ones. So this is, if I could sum this up in a word, it's not in a word, but a phrase: get your reps in. It's going to take a lot of reps, right? You're going to underwrite 100 or 200 properties before you buy a property. You're going to make hundreds of phone calls to brokers. You're going to research a market. You're going to find out that market's not what you thought it was after you spent a a lot of time, 12, 24, 48 hours, taking a deep dive in the market, you're going to find that it's not the market and you're going to move on. But in all of those setbacks, you're picking up vital information and you're picking up a feel for what's going on. And that feel becomes instinctual. You can instinctually know, all right, this deal is actually looking like it's going to be a deal. This lead is looking like it's going to be a deal. Do I actually have a yeah, it actually looks like something. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that go on that nobody ever talks about, right? Like Gino, one of the biggest things he talks about is it took him 18 months to land his first deal, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the brokers literally told him, you're never going to buy a deal here. But he did. And now he owns over 1,000 doors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's all because get your reps in. No, it's not going to be easy. It's not all fun and games. It's kind of like that picture of the iceberg, right? There's a little piece of the iceberg up top, and that's the success. But then you have the iceberg under the waterline, and that's all the work that you had to do to get to that success.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly like that. This is my this is the one that I read. It was my favorite. I thought it was spot on.
Yeah. I mean, go for the goal. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't want to disencourage anybody from having hard to reach goals or anything, but please put it into context of high achieving goals take more work than low achieving goals. And
just know that it's out there, right?
It's relative. Yeah.
No, you're going to hire that property manager and he's going to absolutely suck, and you're going to have to take property management over yourself, and you're going to be like, why the hell am I in this? Well, you're in it. Don't lose focus of your vision. You're in it to create that financial freedom. Know that Mother Nature is going to come through and she's going to blow your roof off, or you're not going to be in a flood zone, but all of a sudden you're going to have a flood, right? Like I lived in Queens during Hurricane Sandy in New York City, and there were houses that got 4 feet of water in them that were nowhere near a floodplain and have never flooded in over 100 years. And I know that from firsthand knowledge, right? My family's been in the area for over 100 years. And they said the water's never gone above 160th Avenue. And we had water 5-8 blocks higher than that. And we're talking city blocks. We're not talking like 50-foot long blocks. We're talking from there to there, it's got to be a half a mile. So Mother Nature can throw something at you. You could have a hailstorm out of nowhere. Well, we never had hail, or we never had tornadoes. Just know that it's not always peaches and cream and roses. Things are going to happen, and you just have to pivot, and you have to be able to respond to them and just take care of business.
Yeah. And it's just like going back to fishing, and you can learn a lot about what you have to do to be successful just by sitting on the bank and observing other people fish before you before you dive in and see if it's maybe even worth your time to put a line in. Because inevitably you might be able to talk to some of these people that are having a good catch, and they might be very open to like, this is my gear I'm using, this is what I'm using, this is blah 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 blah. You'd be surprised how forthcoming people are with their knowledge when they're talking about something they love.
Yes, I had so there's a piece of bait called a hellgrammite, and that hellgrammite is like it's better than worms. It's like the fish go absolutely crazy over them. And these 2 old timers walked into the woods, and we were fishing in a little pool, and they walked into the woods, and they were over at the outlet, and they were moving the rocks around. They had a net, and I didn't know what they were doing. They were friendly enough, but they were doing their own thing. And then they brought over a Helgramite to us, and they gave it to my son, and they were like, "Here, use this," and they showed him how to bait the hook with it, because there's a specific way, and you got to go under the shell. And that's the only thing my son likes using now. Like whenever we go back to that spot, he's like, "Dad, we got to catch Helgramites," because. But that was somebody sharing their knowledge with us that they didn't even have to, and I wouldn't have ever known it. Don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to be observant, because people will share knowledge in fishing, but they'll share it. I can't tell you how many times people have shared knowledge with me in real estate, and going forward, I now share that knowledge with other people because people have been so open with me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, thanks, Neil. I know you're going to have to go here. Again, great conversation. I think it's just super useful sometimes when you're going through a complicated process to try and put it into context of something that you already have a pretty good grasp on, and that might just, take the edge off the complexity of it for you, or at least, break it down to, oh, okay, here's the logical steps when I put it into context of something that I'm familiar with.
Yep, you use the framework. I hope that we've given you a framework to use here. Plug it in to your framework in language that you understand. And Greg, you're doing a great job on the podcast. I love listening to it as the new episodes come out. And just keep doing what you're doing. You're adding a lot of value to the market out there.
Right on. Thank you, Neil. Where do people go to find you and learn about Helgramites?
Yeah, Helgramite's a great.
I have no idea what that is, but we'll save that for another time.
It's a great bait. Like I thought worms were the thing, but they're not.
I'm thinking it's a snail thing. Is it a snail?
It's no, it's actually the larvae of a fly.
Okay.
And
you can't buy them at the bait store?
No.
Oh, okay.
In July,
wow.
you gotta go out there and you gotta hunt for them yourselves. So you
Oh.
have a leg up. Like if you're fishing and the guy's always hitting, he's using Helgramites, you're using worms.
But so, where do we find you, Neil?
Neil, Neil at Bullmac, BULMAC properties.com. That's my email address. You can always reach out to me any questions. I'm always willing to add value and pass along the things that I've learned, because people have helped me. So it's it's kind of like my duty to help other people that need it.
Yeah, right on. Thank you all again for joining us here, Real Wealth Solutions Podcast. We would greatly appreciate it if you took the time to leave a review and subscribe. And if our conversation with Neil struck a chord with you and you think somebody would enjoy it, please go ahead and just share it with them as well. And if you'd like to know more about what we're doing at Real Wealth Solutions, we are at realwealthsolutions. And our contact information is there as well. Feel free to reach out anytime. And thanks again, Neil. We will see you all on the next episode.